So, if you haven't noticed, I never really got into the whole mud flood thing. And there's a reason for that. When looking at a lot of the stuff, I noticed something. They missed something when they talked about it. We all went to school. It was an indoctrination. They told us a lot of lies. A lot of stuff was bullshit. But you can't throw everything out. And I think the sad thing is, I was one of these kids that didn't really pay attention. I didn't really pay that much attention to school. I never did my homework, any of that crap. Which I guess in a way I'm thankful now. I didn't get so indoctrinated. But there was some things I do recall. And that was like things like the Tennessee Valley Flood Authority. And, the history of the floods and stuff like that. I mean, I remember weird things. I remember, I guess, just different things than what most people would remember sometimes. I could get into the whole thing of what's really going on with Cohen and Trump and how that's all an act and the mafia and what is really going on. But, it's not for now. They left out the understanding of geology. There was a period of time in this country where it was rapidly growing. People were planting in new areas. People were building in new areas. But because the country really didn't have a history, a recorded history, other than what the Native Americans might have known. And of course, why would they share any of the correct information with people that just slaughtered them? So, what happened in this country, all over the place, was, there were periods and cycles where there's rain. And people built in the wrong areas. Like the history of Egypt, we know the Nile ran right up to the pyramids. That valley was flooded. The Egyptian, the end of the Nile, that was just like Louisiana. That area flooded often. So, what happened was, at the turn of the century, dams were erected to prevent flooding, to control flooding, things like that. And it's important for us to understand this. You can look at geological surveys. You can even get into insurance flood. They have these little flood maps. They go with 500-year predictions, 1,000-year flood maps, 50-year cycles, different cycles. So they know areas, they know possible damage in different areas, and they understand things. And of course, they have to reevaluate for the dams and different things, but they understand the geology of the land. We don't understand that because we weren't paying attention, right? So a lot of cases that I've seen where they're saying, well, it was crazy mud flood and all this stuff. I was like, well, yeah, but if you go back and look at the historic documents, they talk about a flooding in that area and how it was a mistake to build there. And so they had to put a dam up the river further up there to prevent them from happening again. You can't scream that this is going on without understanding the whole story or telling people the whole story. So, yeah, as soon as I saw that people weren't explaining things, I said, no, I'm not looking at it. Because, I've done things like take a look at floodplains. Take, for instance, the area of Sandy Hook, okay? See, now, you had the Naugatuck River here, which runs, all the way up from the Berkshires, all the way down, right? All the way down through Shelton, Milford, all that, okay? And Sikorsky helicopter right there. And this had flooding problems. Matter of fact, in the 40s, it flooded out so bad, people lost their houses right and left and it looked like a mud flood, okay? Everything from churches being flooded to homes, everything. When a flood happens, water tears up on the banks, pushes all the dirt around. basically a mud flood. Okay? But over here you have the Housatonic. The Housatonic also goes all the way up into Massachusetts and the Berkshires, right? The mountain snow up here gets funneled down here with two ridge lines, right? It's funneled down. So a ton of water gets put down here. And what they even had to do is to control some of the flooding, they built what was called the Stevenson Dam right outside of Sandy Hook, just south of Sandy Hook. Great bass fishing right under here. Now, this is a hydroelectric dam that they built in 1917. They got the power up and running, 3 generators in 1919. Created a big lake behind it. Okay? Created a big lake, and the river is wider even all the way up to Sandy Hook than what it was original. So, it's interesting to understand these things, and very important. Because when you take accounts of like what was going on as far as flooding in like the area of Sandy Hook. Everybody knows the area of Sandy Hook. You built dams. Stevenson Dam, there's a dam a little bit even more south. Okay? Couple. They build these dams, they back up the water, right? In the past, the snow melts up in the area through Lake Zor, everything else trickles down, okay? A lot of groundwater. But if it passes through smoothly out to the sea, not much of a problem. You back it up with the dams, and over the years, those aquifers fill up. Water melts from the snow, rain, everything else. Water's got no place to go. Too much water. So then you get floods in areas where it's more like a swampy flood. And that used to happen in Newtown quite often. Floods all the time. But it's important to understand the geology of places so we don't just go along with, bullshit. We don't know the history of something, and we put a house or a building or whatever there. Oh, I'm going to build this building here. All of a sudden, you get this flood. You're like, oh shit, we got a mud flood. No. You understand that these things can happen if you build near rivers or and stuff like that. And it doesn't have to be near a river. If they build something that plugs up something here, the water's got to come out somewhere else. It's just like anything, right? You think about it. Let's say you like when you're a kid, if you ever played around in a brook and let's build a dam. Keep on building up, right? Then you notice the water's still coming. It's got to go somewhere. It comes either up and over, it pushes against the side. Stuff backs up. The water's still got to go somewhere. You're creating pressure. And people need to understand that. You could be a ridgeline over from a river, and if you back it up there and all that underground water has no place to come and no place to relieve itself, you're pushing it back. There's a lot of interesting secrets about what went on in Sandy Hook, and I'm not going to talk about those because I want to use those in court against these people one of these days. You need to understand that we just can't just jump on these things without fully understanding what might have taken place. The Tennessee Valley Flood Authority, they taught it in school. Maybe I went to a different school, which was actually just a normal little town school. Maybe they're teaching better in little towns than in cities, but I would think that even in cities they taught about the Tennessee Valley Authority. They even had a movie back in the day with was it Robert Redford or something like that? I think it was called the River or something like that. It was about that. It was about like the flooding in the Tennessee Valley, because that had a lot of the same situation. People were farming, they're building valleys. Next thing you know, there's a flood. Well, it's not just this miraculous flood. It's because the idiots built in the fucking floodplain. You build in a floodplain, you're gonna get flooded. Just saying. You build dams, that creates pressure. You're gonna cause other water issues, other places, if it's not fully studied and understood. We have to understand things fully before we just jump on board. So this is just my reason besides, my reasoning for not jumping out in the whole mud flood thing is, I understood a little bit about geology and history and cycles. Take some time, read geological reports, read floodplain maps from insurance companies that are boring as hell. You can learn a lot. Just saying. You can't learn everything from YouTube from somebody just saying this stuff. Don't even listen to me. Read what I just said to read. Educate yourself. Quit being fucking stupid,